Hello, and welcome to today's webcast entitled Future Ready IT Service Insights from City of Fort Myers. I'm Sean McSpadden, and I serve as a senior fellow with the Center for Digital Government and with our Center for Public Sector AI. Very excited to serve as the host for today's webcast. I want to thank all of you for joining us. I think we're going to have a great conversation over the next 60 minutes. We do have some housekeeping notes for you on the screen. We'll email all of you and other registrants a recording of the presentation within 48 hours of the close of the webcast. Please use the recording for your own reference, or better yet, please pass it along to your colleagues using the share widget in the console menu. We'd also welcome any questions that you have along the way, so please submit them using the Q&A widget in the console menu. And finally, we do have a variety of resources available for download via the related content widget in the console menu. Well, with that housekeeping out of the way, it's my great pleasure to introduce our featured speakers for today. Andrew Graff, who serves as a Chief Product Officer for Team Dynamics, and Richard Calkins, who serves as the Director of IT for the City of Fort Myers. Gentlemen, it's great to have you with us. Would love to give each of you an opportunity to introduce yourself to our audience. Andrew, we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. I'm glad to be here. Andrew Graff, Chief Product Officer, Team Dynamics, and spent several decades in the service management and work management space. So I'm really excited to explore the topic with Richard.
Thank you, Andrew. And Richard, welcome.
Thanks, Sean. Richard Calkins, I'm the IT Director for the City of Fort Myers, Florida. For those of you who are not familiar, we're a Gulf Coast city, about 100,000 residents in a metro area between Tampa and Miami. Probably in our direct location, maybe about 750 to 1 million people. So I've been the director of the city's IT department for going on about 7 years now. We became a Team Dynamics customer about 2 years ago. Prior to that, I worked for the city in a GIS capacity. I was the GIS manager and then the GIS analyst. I've been 18 years at the City of Fort Myers, so I've seen quite a bit of change, especially from the digital and technical perspective. Prior to that, I came from the private sector. I was a RF engineer designing cell phone networks. So kind of seen it all, and hopefully that we can have a good conversation about where IT is going and some of the stuff we've done here at the city.
Well, thank you, Richard. It's great to hear more about your background, the great work you've done for the City of Fort Myers over time. And I know, Andrew, you and Richard and your teams have been working together for some time. So I'm anxious to hear more about Richard's story there at the City of Fort Myers. So I'm going to hand things over to you, Andrew. Why don't you take it away?
Yeah, thank you, Sean. I appreciate it. So today what we're going to talk about is the future of the IT service desk. What are the kinds of changes we're seeing from a technology perspective to support the kinds of process and environment changes that you're seeing in your governmental agency? So really excited about this. Before we get started, I'll just give you a quick blurb about Team Dynamics. So we work across about 25 industries. We have a very large contingent of customers in the government space, and we have a single platform for managing all the work that goes on in the organization. So service management work, project work, all underpinned with automation and AI, and it's all no code. So very, very highly capable with a low total cost of ownership, because you don't have to staff software developers and deep technical people to make it go. And we do have an incredible breadth of customers, like I was mentioning, all different shades within the government space. And there's really a couple reasons that we see customers come to Team Dynamics. Number one, like I mentioned, low total cost of ownership, but it's also easy to use, right? And we offer an incredible amount of capability. So whether you're starting on a maturity journey or you're mature, we have very, very adept at helping you. And we move government agencies and governments off of lots of different products. Decatur was on BMC, Riverside was on BMC, Chugach was on ServiceNow, Louisville, Huntsville were Sharewell, a bunch off of Trackit and older solutions. So we've done this hundreds and hundreds of times, helping people transition. So with that, I want to dive into the content. We'll use some of the content from a study that we did with the Center for Digital Government as a jumping off point for conversation. So if you look at this, the study here, this was a national survey, really interesting, talking about the biggest challenges. And if you notice, staffing constraints were number one, budget constraints, lack of automation, aging infrastructure. I'm sure everyone here can relate to at least a handful of these challenges, if not all of them. But what was really, really fascinating was when you think about staffing constraints and budget constraints, and especially lack of automation, all of that points to a challenge that our teams that we have are overburdened. I can't think of a single customer that says, oh, I have more FTE than I know what to do with, or my budgets are getting approved to a point where I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to hire everybody. I have never heard that, right? It's typically the opposite, where we have more technology than ever. It's changing faster than ever. We have shadow IT that these departments expect us to help them integrate and help them maintain. And so I think it's unrealistic for most of our customers to say, well, I need another 10 heads next year. So what we're seeing in the space is through modernization, using process and technology to help address this, right? To bring that workload down to something that's reasonable, yet provide better service. So I think that's really, really exciting. I mean, Richard, when you look at this, what are your key takeaways? What has your experience been with the points on this survey?
Yeah, well, it definitely feels familiar, because I would think that from my perspective too, and what I've encountered in my, the last, 6-7 years of going through IT budgets and digital transformations at the city, these categories are spot on. Staffing constraints are always there. You need the people to get the job done. Some of these, are kind of correlated to each other. An aging infrastructure, you need people to change that out, right? Those are project managers, technical experts sometimes. So if you don't have the staffing to run the big projects, your infrastructure or systems could be aging. The lack of automation sometimes is also due to the aging, system or infrastructure. Some of the older systems that you run just may not have the ability to be automated as much as some of the newer systems. Case in point, we're going through an ERP implementation right now. We're actually going to be going live October 1st after about an 18-month implementation with Oracle Fusion. And that has just given us such an ability to revisit all of our processes, and add that automation or those efficiencies that we're being asked to, develop. In our old system, which is was installed in 2002, so you're talking about a 20-plus-year-old ERP. It just didn't have the capability of doing a lot of that. So these numbers, but again, that took a team of people, again, a staffing constraint, a resource constraint. So, you have to kind of take these, as they're not just single things, but they build on each other as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've heard similar stories throughout the government space, and what's also fascinating is when you think about the workload placed on your teams, the firefighting around service management, service requests, incidents, major incidents, problems. We find that what happens is it's so overwhelming that the attention and focus is spread so far that it's hard to do a great job of any of it, right? We're human, so it's hard to manage that many things. And while somebody's chopping through a queue of mundane ticket tasks, there might be somebody waiting in queue who really needs the help and needs more time than what that technician or service provider feels as though they can give. And when you think about automation and AI, which is a key area of technology that can help, I don't think of it. I don't know a single client who's like, look, we're going to use that to replace to get rid of a bunch of heads. None of our clients have enough heads. So they're looking at it as a way to relieve pressure, provide a higher level of service, and allow their team members to focus on the work that people do best. And I think of automation AI as like having a team of team members or interns that work 24/7, right? 365, that do the things that I don't necessarily want to have to do, and my customers don't want to have to wait for us to do by submitting a ticket. So, let's talk about what you're seeing, right? What are the top pressures you're facing at the city of Fort Myers?
So that first bullet point, the increased focus on efficiency, that has been very prevalent here at Fort Myers, but all across the state of Florida, and I'm sure in other locations as well. But the state of Florida, when the elections happened and the federal DOGE group was kicked off to look for federal government efficiencies, some states, and Florida included, created their own kind of internal Florida Department of Government Efficiency. And they tasked all of the municipalities, all the counties, all the cities, all the government agencies to review everything they do for efficiency and to provide them all the data, all the contracts, all your head count. And it was a large data, collection process to do all that. I think we ended up turning over about 6,000 documents, to the Florida DOGE, to kind of say, okay, here's everything we do. Here's all of our people. Their response was, well, thank you. We'll get back to you. I think they got so much data that we are now in the kind of the waiting period while they go through all that. And I'm certain that they're using an AI platform of some kind to review all of our documentation, maybe make suggestions, or just help guide the state to be a more efficient government. That has been a big focus for us internally as well. Obviously, when we're asked to do that by the state, it kicked off an internal group where we would sit down with, all of our different functional groups, public safety, like our police and fire departments, our public works department, and make them kind of look at their processes, their current projects. Are they being run efficiently? Do you have enough people? Do you, need more? Where's the resource constraints? What is the turnaround time for things like your permitting department, your development services? So that efficiency, you have to be able to answer that. That's a big part of it. Is not just, we always try to be more efficient, but now we have to prove our efficiency, which is kind of something that in the past we would always do our KPIs. This is how we measured ourselves. Now we have to kind of show with actual data, that we're meeting these government efficiency standards or these KPIs that other agencies have set, and we have to then retune our models, our efficiency models based on that guidance. So that's definitely one of the things that here in Florida, anyway, I've had to encounter in the last, several months. New services for security, absolutely. 2 years ago, the state of Florida passed a bunch of new cybersecurity mandates, basically breach and security reporting if there's any issues. We've also had to basically tell the state, we will follow this, this security standard. In our case, we followed the NIST protocol, and we actually had to give a report to the state that that's what we were doing. And of course, budgets, the do more, it's a little bit of corporate speak, but the do more with less is the new normal. That's the way everyone's going to operate. So it's just, again, I know I'm not going to get, we just finished our budget season October 1st. As a matter of fact, we got our budget approved last night at our city council meeting, and I didn't get 15 new employees that I needed to fill all the gaps. I got one, so it's like, and it's a transfer probably from another department. So those type of things, the escalating budget pressures, and obviously everybody knows, they live it, they feel it, everything's more expensive now. And at a local government level, our big pressure is to keep that tax rate low, keep the services running as best we can, and keep or improving it, with the same amount or less resources than we had, the previous year. So absolutely feeling every one of those bullet points here in Fort Myers.
Yeah, I know you're not alone there for certain. A couple interesting points from the survey as well. A couple big takeaways anyway. Number one, government teams are managing and supporting more applications than ever. And it's not even close, right? That chart looks like this. It's gone up and up to the right. And then also that there's a tremendous amount of manual processes that really put burden on IT staff. I'm not talking about the processes that require a person. I'm talking about things like Active Directory permission changes, things that take time, where all we're doing is running a mouse, right? We're not thinking, right? We're just clicking. And there's a lot of that. And then also there's a general trend towards adoption of automation to take some of those mundane tasks or the toil out of it. So I think that there's those three themes, I think, were really interesting. They align with what we're seeing. I mean, Richard, what do you think? What do you think about the results here? How do you relate to these at Fort Myers?
Yeah, well, the manage and support more is absolutely true. I think my current contract portfolio is pushing 200 various contracts. So it's everything we do now is either cloud or SaaS. We have a few on-prem, but of course those are also guided by vendor contracts. So we have an increasing amount of new platforms to support, and more importantly, new platforms to get to work together. Because you want that data, if you've got platforms that are up in the cloud, but like our police department has a cloud-based RMS now, and a cloud-based CAD, a computer-aided dispatch, and so those things have to talk together. They have to come down to be able to pull into reports. They have to feed into our CGIS requirements. So yeah, lots and lots of things to support, a lot more than before. And with the changes in just digital government, I would say, everybody expects everything to be online. They should be able to interact with their government for the most part, permitting applications, volunteer, special events, all that stuff. All the applications are online, all the accounting is online. So yeah, that's definitely something that we're experiencing here more and more. It's kind of like the Amazonification of government, if you will. Where everybody expects it. It should be easy to do, and so we're working through that, and that's a constant thing. The manual processes, yeah, that's still. I mean, we still have quite a few processes that are manual, and importantly too, there's some of them, the manual are, because there may be an approval process in place, they need to be auditable as well. So every year, our comprehensive financial audit, we have to be able to prove who has access to that financial database, who approved access to that financial database, and then they compare like our off-boarded employees to the users in the financial database to make sure that when someone leaves the city, we're taking them out of the finance system. So, those type of things, it is manual and it is painstaking, but some of them, we need those records. We're also a public record state, an open record state here in Florida. So we have to be able to provide those records if somebody asks for them. Yeah, it's definitely a thing. And of course, automation adoption, that is the thing everybody's looking for. That's what we're trying to do. And again, it's a long road, but it takes people, and it takes new platforms, it takes understanding, and a big part of that is process, right? You have to understand these processes in all your other departments, or what the public process is to say, pull a building permit. And once you know all those processes, that's kind of that first step of getting to, automating it and getting it to recording it in the right way and making sure your data sets are set up right for the reports you're going to have to run. So a lot of that type of adoption of automation requires a very thorough process understanding.
So this is going to be interactive. So we're going to ask some questions. So this is the first poll. So out there, what are the top pressures you're feeling in your organization? We'll kind of compare and contrast this with the survey. So just take a minute, just take a moment and fill this out. All right, so you have 4 choices: budget cuts, security mandates, lack of resources, deadlines are too tight, so unreasonable expectations. So just take a second and fill this out if you could. And Richard, I think one of the most interesting parts of your journey and what we're seeing in this space is that automation topic, and how we're seeing not only more demand for automation, but the need for solutions that don't require deep technical skills to do so, because it's just such a bottleneck to relieving the pressure on the IT team, for certain.
Yeah, that barrier to entry, I guess, to that you can reduce that startup time of getting to those automations by not needing as much development time, having direct integrations to certain platforms, and having, like you said, the low code, no code environments where you might have technical staff that can do it, where you may not need a full stack developer to tie things together. So yeah, a lot of that is really important and will help reduce budget, and if it's automated, generally if you do it with security in mind, it'll help that security platform as well, and then ultimately try to reduce those deadlines.
Yeah, and we're seeing the same thing. So let's see what the audience had to say here. So it looks like the number one category is lack of resources, sort of unsurprising, and budget cuts as well. And I think the deadlines are too tight is also an indicator that you don't have the resources to deliver, right, to meet those expectations. And that's something that's, when you have that problem, we've seen a lot of benefit using resource capacity planning, so you can show to decision makers, leadership, what the burden on the team looks like, and when you add something else, what that does to capacity to get things done. It just helps have a more rational conversation around, hey, if you want to get this done, that's great, but something else has to give. So here are the 3 candidates, things we can push out or change. Being able to have those dialogues is pretty important. So shifting gears, we talked a little bit about automation. Really interesting study that we did recently. And what it found was that the average IT team member is spending between 2 to 3 months a year doing mundane tasks that could be automated. And that's a mind-blowing statistic, right? If you think about it, this is all the password resets. This is the onboarding, offboarding. You see a list of these activities that we commonly see clients trying to automate because it takes so much work, right? So 58% specifically spend five or more hours a week on these types of activities. And in addition to that, what I think was fascinating is 89% of the respondents to that same survey, and it was over 1,000 respondents, 89% said that this type of work also decreases job satisfaction. It's something that's not using your gray matter. It's literally just processing widgets. And we find that people don't want to do that type of work. They want to do the type of work that's engaging, where they have to use their mind to think about solutions and help people. And what was fascinating for a customer I was meeting with recently who has automated a bunch of these processes, I said, well, what have the results been? And he said, it's been fascinating. Our customer satisfaction has gone through the roof because customers don't have to wait on the small things. It happens near instantaneously, but they're also saying that our team is spending more time with them when they really need it to bring their request to closure. the other side of it was employee satisfaction went way up, which I thought was really fascinating. So Richard, as you think about this, talk us through your automation journey. What kind of pressures were you facing? How are you looking at automation?
Yeah, I mean that was a big part of the initial process for our when we converted to Team Dynamics a couple years ago. We kind of went through a IT process exercise, an IT process audit. What are the things that we do? Where we spend most of our time, and how to what are the steps that we have to do that for? So your process mapping, your process review, that's where it all starts. And so from there, you can look at where you can reduce steps, for the manual process, and where some of those steps can be automated. Easy kind of low-hanging fruit things are those, things that every organization has to do, like onboarding, offboarding. We have really tried to go to a paperless, onboarding and offboarding process where, our job applications are online, and that gets routed, to the hiring managers. Even before that, we have a requisition for a job that's done in our ERP system, and then checked against that department's budget. Okay, you have that position, you have the payroll budget for it. Now you can go to the job application, which all of our job applications were loaded up into our recruitment tool. And what's nice about that is we spent the time to go through all of the different job types that we have and ask ourselves from an IT perspective, what does a police officer need from the IT department to do their job? They need an MDT terminal, like a tough book. They need the following packages of software. So we took the time to say, for every position that the city has, what is its IT requirements? So when we know that, we can then automate, or at least budget and understand better. We're going to need, X amount of computers. We're going to need X amount of licenses of Microsoft. We're going to need X amount of, OneDrive capacity. So understanding each one of those positions and what their requirements were on IT was kind of that first step. Then we had to make sure that, can we meet those? Are we, do we have enough computers? If we have let's say our regular churn rate, which are our employee turnovers, probably pushing around 10% per year. So if these positions turn over, do we have the capability of collecting that information back, or collecting those assets back, redeploying, reimaging, redeploying them? What do all those steps look like? And so through that, and there's a lot of coordination with the departments, the hiring departments, and that kind of stuff to go through there. But once you get to that, you can automate things like if there's going to be a new hire, which happens, for us during the budget years usually, or if there's a vacancy, we automatically know as soon as that contingent offer is made to a prospective new employee, it kicks off a series of IT tickets of, hey, we're going to need this laptop provision. We're going to need these licenses. This person is going to sit at this location. So we need to make sure we have a computer, a monitor, all that stuff by this date, because you want them to hit the ground running. You don't want them to get there and then IT follows up 2 days later with their computer and their phone. So we want to make sure that we're getting ahead of that. And then, from there, it's just tweaking that process to where does that fall flat? What do we need? So and then of course, billing for us, we do chargebacks. So then billing that appropriately to all that time and those tickets that are billed back to the departments. I now have clear data on what it takes to hire an employee, or if an employee leaves, what that turnover, that churn cost is from an IT perspective. So that's just one of a myriad of different, repetitive tasks that we've tried to tackle. I would probably give you 20 different things that you deal with on day-to-day stuff that we did, but looking for those kind of what are your biggest time suckers, or where is your biggest, where do your complaints come from? It's very, when you're hiring a new employee and you want to put your organization's kind of best foot forward, you want them to be happy with their choice of coming to work for you. Nothing's more deflating than day one, we're not ready for you. We didn't get this ready. We don't know what to tell you, that kind of stuff. So focusing on those things that are going to have kind of payback later on of they had a good onboarding experience. They had a good orientation experience. Now you've kind of set the stage for them to really just get into the job that they were hired to do. So we kind of look at that from a customer service perspective as well. What processes have the most bang for the buck when it comes to, customer service, employee satisfaction? What do employees hate to do that we can do for them? Those are the type of things that I try to look for regularly too.
I like that. What are the types of things that people hate doing, and can we automate them? I think that's a great lens. Often we get the question, well, where do we start? Right? There's so many things. And what I've seen our best clients do is they find processes that are painful for everyone involved. The customer hates them, people internally hate them. And if we can automate them, or they're risk prone, or they need to happen near instantaneously, there's processes typically that can be automated that everyone will be happy once they are. And that usually builds momentum. So if you fix those things where everyone involved, wow, this is so much better. What it does is people say, well, okay, that was pretty good. What else can we automate? So I've seen that to be fairly successful. Now, another poll: if you could automate anything, what would it be, right? And we have a sampling here from that survey, right? So onboarding, offboarding, password resets, software provisioning, Active Directory, permission updates, or maybe you have it all done. Maybe you feel as though you're optimized. So take a second here and fill these out. There's no right or wrong answer. It's where is your pain? And people also often ask, well, how do we figure this out? Well, there's a wealth of data in your existing ticketing system. So you can take that information and profile it, right? It's a great use of AI. Take the last 6 months of tickets, throw it into AI and say, hey, what are the top themes here that we're dealing with? Really, really powerful for that type of analysis. So Richard, what is your guess as to what's going to be number one here?
I would say, because it comes from a lot of varying, like we talked about, so many different vendor contracts, and a lot of them are per user, per seat thing. I can see software provisioning being difficult. It's something that we, still every time we add on a new player in our platforms, how do we get users into that? How do we set that up initially? And and part of that is within the onboarding, offboarding experience. So I think there's going to be quite a bit there in the software. The onboarding, offboarding is always a slow process. I feel like no matter what, there's nothing more. There's nothing more, I guess, irritating or aggravating of being a hiring manager, being a director, and getting a new employee approved, and then seeing it take 3 weeks to get them in doing the job. That's just, to me, wasted time. We need to get that person. We hired you, got a job for you. Let's get on it. So turning that into a automated process where the offer letter says you're going to start on September 15th, and on September 15th we've got your desk, got everything ready to go, and you can just start your new journey right there. I think that is really kind of the gold standard, if we can.
Well, let's see. You were right. I think that was a pretty good guess. Very, very. I mean, what the good news is that all of this is within reach, right? We have customers doing this day in and day out, and removing that burden can be, less effort than you thought it would be, and especially a lot less effort than it would have been even 24 months ago from a technology perspective. So really, really interesting. I think there's a ton of opportunity. If you're in any of these categories, there's a lot of opportunity for automation to help, in my opinion, what I've seen. So shifting a little bit, Another area for efficiency, and I like that you were talking about efficiency across the organization, is enterprise service management. So what does that mean? Well, that means being able to efficiently manage all of the work, not just IT work, where organizations are processing requests, to-dos, right? HR has cases, facilities has work orders, and they require workflow. They require collaboration. So we're seeing a lot of opportunity, and onboarding is a great example of where lots of different departments have to collaborate to achieve an outcome. And so we're seeing this proliferation of organizations wanting to manage not just IT work, but also the non-IT work. And I know, Richard, that this is sort of on your plans going forward for this. So I'd like to get a better understanding of your roadmap, right? So
Yes.
how are you looking at this? We talked about automation, AI, resolving mundane tasks. We talked about better workflow and better tools to manage and make your teams more efficient and reduce burden. How do you put all this together? How are you thinking about your roadmap going forward?
So when I first became the director for the city, for the IT department, kind of the first thing I did was I hired, actually it was Infotech, to come in and do a workshop for us on an actual IT roadmap. Where do we want to be next year, 2 years, 5 years down the road? And part of that is again, it's process review. What is it that you do? And how can we get there, and what is that maturity level you're at, and what kind of maturity level do you want to be at, 5 years from now, let's say. And, and I think that timeline has sped up. It's when I did the roadmap exercise, I felt like it was a linear process, but now with AI and some of the automation tools that are out there, I think that can be an exponential process. You can get there much quicker than you could even 5 years ago, so, and where it might have taken a development team, that you had to have on staff to tie some of your systems together with, SQL processes kicking off at various times at night, to, inject data into different databases. Now with, the APIs and the iPasses and the Zapiers and all these things that you have, these platforms that you have, and AI being able to talk to all of it, and I think that roadmap can be accelerated now. But you still have to do the work. You still have to understand the process of what you need to get done. So no matter how fast you want to go down that road, that process optimization is the key. Understanding what you do, understanding what happens across your entire organization. IT at a local government, especially the way we run it, we're an internal service organization. And we really take that to heart, that our job is to service the rest of the city's employee base so they can provide government services to the citizens. I'm lucky I happen to live in the city. I'm only a mile away from work, so I'm also my own customer. So I see the end product of what I do in better government services. So, but understanding that from whatever viewpoint it is, whether it's your customer service, whether it's your citizen service, whatever it is, understanding those processes and how you can make it better, I think is the key. Now, starting that roadmap is sometimes, it can feel daunting, but it's really just looking at your major, why are you here? What's your job role? What are you being asked to provide? And once you get that, then how do you do that? Who does that for us? Is there a way to automate that? Or is there a way to outsource some of it? It's just different ways to look at getting that process done. I think the integration with AI now has made that you can ask it questions a lot and get a lot of responses, that would take research in the past, that would take report writing in the past, or looking at white papers that were provided to you, and using a lot of different tools, where now it's a bit more centralized, that you have this ability to ask an AI and then develop your roadmap based on, inputs kind of on the fly, which is great. And so that's, my thing would be, again, just the process, understanding of the process is where it starts.
Mhm. No, I totally agree. I totally agree with what you're saying. I think what we're going to try to do here is we're going to try to summarize in a minute with a visual some of the topics we've talked about. So improve tools to make sure work flows through the organization in a synchronized way, automation to remove burden, improve response times, improve customer sat, and AI to do the same. Now, when we think about that synchronization, I think one of the ways to envision it is think about all the different systems in your ecosystem and what data resides in those systems and how you would need to extract that information to answer a question. That's one way to visualize how integration and automation can help your organization, because a lot of processes require information from multiple sources. So being able to do that without having to write code or have a full stack developer can be really, really powerful. In that the AI component, especially with conversational AI, there's a ton of frustration with it. I think all of us have had terrible experiences with conversational AI. Technology has changed a lot in the last 18 months. And so in our case, we have a leading framework for ingesting content and refreshing that content so that you can essentially point the conversational AI tool at any of your existing, websites, SharePoint sites, PDFs that might have your employee handbook. Think about all the places where the answers are. And then look at, okay, when answers reside in systems, maybe one-to-many systems, we can use automation to extract that through conversational AI. And we can actually automate the fulfillment of requests as well. So when you put those things together, it becomes incredibly powerful. I think we look at integration and automation as the required foundation and footing for AI to get a good return on investment. Without that, it just answers questions based upon static content, which is good, but it's not great. So a quick audience poll. Where are you in your AI and automation journey? Anywhere from we haven't even started to, hey, we feel like we are optimized. We have our virtual agents running. We have them tied in with integration and automation capabilities. Where are you in that journey? And we see every part of that spectrum out there. Probably the smallest cohort is we're fully automated and optimized. I know very few organizations that feel as though that's where they are, right? And just answer quickly doesn't have to be, just your initial gut reaction is usually perfect for that. So we'll give this a few more seconds. So we'll see where you land. I'm guessing most people will not be D. And I'm guessing, I don't know, Richard, what do you think the top category?
I'm thinking somewhere between B and C would be my, where I think I am right now.
Yeah.
We do have a number of automations in place. We haven't dug, we're started pilot projects with virtual agents, but we haven't operationalized any of them yet. So that's kind of the brave new world that we're in is every platform has also got its new AI agent, and getting the agents to talk to each other and doing that kind of stuff is, I think that's that next realm, that next step that we're going to be, going into.
So you were pretty close. Right? That some workflow and automation are in place, but a long way to go. And we have 3.1% that feel fully integrated and automated, which is fabulous, right? Now, let's go ahead and put a visual on this. I mean, Richard shared a lot about Fort Myers. I've shared some of my observations and experience with customers. If you're a visual learner, we wanted to bring in my colleague Tiffany to actually show you some of the concepts in the Team Dynamics platform. And as you're looking at this, use this as a lens to think about how you might use existing tools, right? I'm not suggesting Team Dynamics is the right fit for you. It'll fix all your problems because I don't know your requirements, but hopefully this will give you some ideas. So Tiffany, thank you. Let you jump in.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. So we've been talking a lot about, how we can do more with less, like we mentioned earlier. And Andrew's been talking a lot about how that really can be driven through AI and automation, making sure not only that you're completing those tasks and providing that great support and service, but also that you are keeping the team that's doing that work satisfied as well by keeping those more mundane tasks, where people aren't thinking and they're just clicking, automated behind the scenes. And a lot of that can start with meeting your end users right where they need to be. And so that might be through a portal where you are taking in service requests and letting people review knowledge. But of course, that's also where you can present that virtual service agent that can do that as well. Maybe starting off with some proactive communication, letting people know about outages that they're managing, but then also allowing people to take that a step further and self-service or get automated support. We talked about two different options, right? Andrew talked about being able to point it to information and keep that information up to date to answer questions for people. And of course, a virtual service agent is going to be able to do that through things like knowledge base crawls or through web crawls as well, linking people to the right information and then providing additional support in order to confirm that that information was able to assist them too. But we can also take that a step further. Andrew talked about how important it was to have these virtual service agents tied into integration, and that we can see that that's our step to begin automating those more mundane tasks. If I say that I can't log in, we can now reach out to another system and unlock my account or trigger a password reset activity. Based off of what system that is, I can determine what sort of activities we're going to allow users to do. And because users can be authenticated in, we can make sure that we are working that correct account. And of course, when we think about not being able to log in, if somebody fails to log in too, we can have different instructions followed for them too. And all of this is built on a simple to use engine that makes it easy to build out these integrations. We talked about at the start how having those resource constraints can often make making those changes and improvements difficult. So it's important to identify a solution that's going to help streamline that process and not result in an extra burden for your teams. With something like Team Dynamics iPaaS solution or conversational AI, you're going to get a block-based building tool that allows you to easily determine what sort of integrations are taking place. Here now, instead, we're looking at something where an HRIS system has triggered automations that result in a new hire taking place, something like Richard was talking about earlier, where once somebody gets marked as hired, that's going to go ahead and create their user accounts, maybe reach out to the manager for additional information. I love to talk about how these types of platforms can really pull a lot of data together in order to get the right information to make the right decisions, like whether this user needs Zoom or Adobe. But sometimes that information just lives in somebody's head, and we're not quite to the technology space yet where my brain has APIs available. And so you can send out a form to collect that type of information too. And then we talked about creating those tickets, for all of that activity that needs to be manually managed as well. And then, of course, all of that can feed into a ticketing or work management system that allows people to work together and see what sort of work, needs to be done after that automation has taken place. Something like a dashboard where you can see what your team's doing, see that feedback, measure those KPIs like we talked about earlier as well. Being able to prove that information about your performance to the people that matter when it comes to auditing and providing that efficiency notification too. And that's going to be true across a wide variety of teams. Andrew talked about the importance of not just elevating that IT support, but support across the enterprise or the organization. And so teams like HR might be able to see in a single glance what everybody's doing from that new hire perspective when it comes to that onboarding type information too. So having a tool that provides you all of that functionality within a single layer and all of that visibility across those teams can really help with some of those constraints that we were talking out at the beginning. Now, I've seen a lot of great questions come in the Q&A, so I'll hand things back to Andrew and the team so that we can have some questions and some additional information that we'll review too.
All right, Andrew, would you like me to take things away?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Great, perfect. Yeah, as was mentioned, we have gotten some great questions from our audience members. The first one came fairly early on in our conversation. Would love to get both of your perspectives on how this kind of system automation in the service management space might assist with the shadow IT environment and security audits. Can you talk a little bit about that? Certainly that's top of mind, compliance, security for our state and local government audience members. Andrew, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I think that bridges two different areas, and I'll think in terms of our solution. So we have an ITSM management solution that can help identify shadow IT, right? It identifies unauthorized software being used, both cloud and installed, and that can trigger action, all right, to deprovision access to those applications, et cetera. So I think that's probably the number one way that shadow IT gets identified. Now, I would say, well, if the shadow IT, if you mean by shadow IT that somebody has a purchase card, they buy something and say, hey, make this work, that integration automation platform can be incredibly powerful, because rather than having to learn the APIs in great detail and write code, you can use that Blockly or Scratch formatted integration to transform data and push it to where it needs to go, or pull data in the right format more easily. So that's been sort of my experience with a solution to that particular question.
Wonderful. Richard, any thoughts?
Yeah, so generally, the big issue with shadow IT is, as Andrew kind of pointed out, is you learn about it after the fact, right? You learn about it after, oh, hey, we just got this new, device and we want to set it up, or we bought these new printers, and we want them on the network, and so I think a big part of that is understanding your purchasing processes. And that's, to me, where you can get ahead of the game. Understand your annual budgeting process. If like for me, we have to turn in our budgets a year ahead of time. So I'm reviewing budgets from all the departments and saying, hey, we can help with this project. We can help with this, need that you guys have, and you put money in your budget for it. But I think we can do that. The other thing is, and this is more of a, you have to take it upstairs sometimes to your administrations, to say, hey, we purchase everything technology based in the city centrally. IT, we have to approve a technology purchase before it is, gone to PO, or the P card issue, like Andrew said, somebody goes and, puts out a procurement card and buys a new laptop from Best Buy rather than ordering it through one of your state contracts. That's something that is both, basically an employee, issue, or an employee education issue. But that can now be, just like there's technologies, platforms that are, helping us, not put devices on our network. There's technology platforms in finance and in banking now that say if a product someone's trying to buy falls into one of these categories, don't allow it. Only allow the IT department's cards to buy computers. And so we've done some of that too, where we've actually used the platforms of other departments to help control for things like shadow IT. The security audit is kind of, like Andrew said, it's kind of a different thing. What you're looking at there is, trying to make sure that you're set up properly. And I think your platforms for auditing can help you out with that. One of the things is, basically user access control, those type of things. It might show you, and this happens a lot internally for us. And one of the things that we see from a permissions perspective, let's say, is, someone climbs the ladder in the police department. They go from being a patrol officer to now they're, say in the detectives bureau, and then they get into special investigations, and then they might bounce over to our, drug and crime unit or something like that. And we have to be careful to change their permissions along the way. If you're not reevaluating your internal transfers and your internal promotions, you may be leaving permissions behind that now that detective has access to something that they maybe shouldn't have access to. So those type of things where the platforms, you have to automate kind of a transfer is similar to a new hire when it comes to what we're looking at. Because if you leave their permission there, and you get, in our case, either a CGIS or an FDLE audit that says, why does this person have access to your digital evidence locker? Well, it's because they used to be a detective, but now they're over here, and so we get dinged for that. So we have to make sure that we're keeping that in these platforms, that review your permissions and your access. That's where you can find some of that. It's not really shadow IT, but it's kind of leftover IT, I guess I'd call it.
Yeah, absolutely, Richard. Just some great insights there. Certainly informed by your experience over time. Just great advice. Hey, I want to keep the conversation going. We only have a few minutes left. I would like to move to a conversation about, this issue of you've seen one state, you've seen one local government, you've seen one state, you've seen one local government. We're all at different places along the way. And so I'll kind of combine a couple of our audience questions. Many of us are at different stages of readiness for an initiative like this. Would love to get your thoughts, starting with you, Richard, on the top one or two things that organizations should be doing to prepare themselves in the next year, perhaps even those organizations that don't currently even have a ticketing system. And what are those things that they should be trying to avoid, those mistakes they should stay away from? Richard, I want to start with you, and then we'll move to Andrew.
I think my biggest thing on this is it is an absolute team effort. So you can't do this as the director of IT if your city management doesn't want it. You can't do it as a public works director if, say your utilities director or utilities manager doesn't want it. It has to be really a team effort, and it has to be kind of championed from the top. So, in my case, the city manager, my assistant city manager, they were all about let's automate, let's track everything. As far as without ticketing systems, to me it goes back to the adage: you can't manage what you don't know. You can't track, you can't action something if you don't know, where do you spend your time, how much does it take, what's the cost of that, So if you don't have a ticketing system, I guess my first thing would be go get a ticketing system. There's a lot of them out there. Andrew's got one to sell you if you want. But there is that's and part of that is that will then inform you where your efficiencies or lack of efficiencies are at. So but again, it has to be, in my opinion, this is an organization wide. You can't do process and automation correctly if the organization isn't ready for it. And by that I mean you have to all want it, and you have to understand it. So if you're not there yet, that's your job, getting everybody else on board to why you want to do this. You kind of have to play the sales pitch of this will be better because we can do all this. We're going to save money. We know all our tickets. We're going to save this much money. We know where we spend our money now. We know how long it takes. Now we'll save money if we can shorten it up. So work on that pitch too.
Very good. Very good. Andrew, would love to get your thoughts on that question, and then also any key takeaways you'd like to leave our audience with before we close.
Yeah, I'll add to what Richard said. I agree with him. For me, it's identifying the pains, clearly identifying the business problems and the pains that are causing you to be your resources to be overburdened, right? That have you falling behind, or the processes where your customers are frustrated. And where those two things overlap, it's an incredible opportunity for automation. And so I think once you frame the business problems that you'd like to address, then you can start looking at how do we do that, right? Based with the tools that we currently have, or if we need to go procure a tool, we need an AI platform, automation, service management, whatever those things might be. But with a clear charter for what we're trying to solve and what those benefits will be, that's a great place to start. And I think the mistake people make is often trying to boil the ocean, saying, hey, we're going to do 100 things. When you could say, look, let's address 4 issues in a finite period of time and do it really well that add value. Start there. And I think also if there's trepidation to dive in head first with a big problem that your customers deal with and you deal with, you can just start with one of the internal ones, one that just makes it easier for your IT people if you want to test the waters, right? Kick the tires, and then go to that process that both customers hate and your team hates.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I used to have a supervisor in the Wayback Time Machine that had the phrase, we need to eat our own dog food first, right? You know, you really do need to ensure that you've tested it out internally. You're the first customer of this kind of change initiative before you start unleashing things on others in your organization. So just some great advice. Well, gentlemen, I want to be respectful of our time, so we're going to have to wrap it up there. I'd love, you know, just love the comments, the insights, the information that you were able to share with our audience today. I want to thank you both for your great insights. I'd also like to thank Team Dynamics for making it possible to have this important webcast discussion today. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you, our audience, for spending time with us. We know you have choices, a lot of time constraints. Appreciate you spending your scarce time with us. To access a certificate of attendance, please click on the certificate widget in the console menu. With that, we look forward to seeing you all again at another government technology event in the near future. And I'd like to wish you all a great rest of your day. Thank you, Richard, Andrew. Great conversation.
Thank
Thank you very much.